Welcome, Rebecca. I'm so happy to have you here on Data Talk, and we just want to get to know all about you.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you first of all for the invitation. And yeah, it's always really daunting when someone asks you about yourself, isn't it? Because you kind of go, "Not really that interesting, awkward." Yeah. So currently, actually, I'm in my last few weeks at KPMG. So I'm director of data science and AI, and run that capability, and have the privilege of working with some fantastic people in our organisation, kind of trying to answer really hard real world problems using machine learning and various forms of machine learning. So a little bit about myself. Feels like I'm pitching to you, it's this kind of like, so this is how I would pitch. Like many people in data science, there was never the plan to go into data science. I always thought I would go and actually teach sport, and go to Loughborough University and have a enjoyable hockey career. But for various reasons, one, my left knee gave out and didn't get the memo about that was the life plan. So I had I was very fortunate to have some major surgery on that knee, and that kind of ended that ambition. But at the same time, so I was doing my A levels. So in the UK, you kind of do your AS levels and then you do A levels. And my A levels were in the arts. And one of them was philosophy. And I came across, we would have these fantastic discussions about what is perception, what is humanity, how do I know I exist, these kinds of quite large questions. And they kind of just made me stagger into popular reading, into neuroscience. And I think I'm really fortunate, and I've said this a few times, that there's kind of one book that really changed the trajectory of my kind of career, or just passions of what I want to do in life. And that was by Susan Greenfield, The Human Brain. And I remember reading it and just being like, oh, wow, no one told me about this. Like, why hasn't anyone told me that this is a thing? What, like, wow. I remember going to my headmaster at the time, and I was like, I need to change my A levels. Like, I've made the complete error. Doing history, I'm doing philosophy, I'm doing PE, etc., etc. I need to change. And he was like, Rebecca, you can't change. You're midway through your A levels. I was like, yeah, I can totally catch up. And he was like, no, you can't. So I ended up doing those A levels, and then in my gap year, whilst finding myself, I didn't find myself at all. I'm still looking, but I went and did some extra A levels at my local college, in biology and chemistry, because at that point you couldn't go and do psychology without having some sort of science background. So I did that and also worked part time. And so yeah, I went to I first started actually, and I think it's really important that kind of people hear this in a way, because I think we kind of look at failure like it's a bad thing, but it's absolutely not. It's it's about, I think my job now is about failing, but failing fast. So I first started my university career at the University of Cambridge, and I started there and I was like, this isn't the right course for me. I was doing biological sciences and I knew that I wanted to go straight into neuroscience. So I actually dropped out, and I think a lot of people, and I definitely felt that at the time, I was like, oh my God, I've just dropped out of Cambridge. What am I doing? This is really frightening. But you're kind of 18, 19, and that's like a big deal. And, kind of just come out as well. And so there was lots going on in kind of my life at that point. And then I went and I thought, okay, I really need to think about where does psychology and neuroscience, and where do I, as an individual, as a gay woman, want to go and study. And Manchester was kind of top of that list. So I went off to Manchester University, I did psychology, absolutely loved it. And part of doing psychology was actually looking at computational neuroscience and biological psychiatry and clinical disorders when the brain goes wrong, when it's damaged. And that was it. I was absolutely hooked on trying to understand what happens in brain disease. And I did my final dissertation in Parkinson's disease, actually, and had a wonderful supervisor. And then that was it. I was just like, God, I'm at the end of my degree now. What do I do now? And I got a job at the National Hospital for Neurology and Neurosurgery as a researcher. And my boss said to me, "Why don't you do a PhD?" And I was like, "What? I'm going to do a PhD? What are you talking about?" Because everyone goes, "Oh, you either go into PhD because that's always what you wanted to do, or like me, you kind of stagger into it." And I did. I just kind of was like, "Okay, sounds like a good idea." So I did my PhD, and that was quite a difficult journey. It was in clinical neuroscience and neuroimaging because at the time, and brain surgery. At the time, I hadn't done a master's, and I was just like, "Well, let's just do it. Let's just see what happens." I've never had a plan. I've always just had this kind of purpose that I want to use my quantitative skills in healthcare in some way to improve patients' lives and also impact society in a positive way. So I went and joined Health Think Tank, and that's pretty brilliant actually, because I got to learn about the NHS and the landscape, and also learn about actually, I need to learn to code, which I wasn't doing very effectively, to be honest. And then at the same time, IBM happened to be recruiting for these things called data scientists, and their job description was around come along and if you've got a PhD, you've got quantitative background, we will train you to code, we will train you to do all these things. And I thought that sounds a really interesting, novel career. I think I'll go try that. And it was quite interesting at the time because they took really, really a diverse group of people from academia. So some came from CERN, some came straight from academia with their postdocs. Others were had been in the industry for quite a long time and were transitioning to be a data scientist, and said, just go find interesting problems. And I remember they sent us to Ohio, and it was like coding camp, but we didn't get the little hats and stuff. And they said, and it was a really structured approach to programming, to Python, to Spark, learning about blockchain and various other integer and non-integer programming for optimization. And to be honest, I was definitely lowest of the class, if that makes sense. I'd come into IBM and I was surrounded by people that had actually been coding since they were 4. They'd built a kind of computer when they were little, and it was a very different. I'd come from a very different background. So I had, I think, a steep learning curve, but one that actually, everyone was very supportive. And I remember many times ringing my wife and saying from America, just going, "What am I doing here? What is going on? I'm so bad at this." But I think that's the thing about, actually failing fast is about how quickly you get up. And that's key to machine learning, really. It's that resilience, right? To keep going, right, my code has failed, I'm going to get up again, and I'm going to keep going and debugging it. Because it doesn't matter how many years experience you have, you don't write perfect code first day, it just doesn't happen. But anyway, I eventually crafted a role there as the European lead for IBM Watson, and worked mainly with pharmaceutical companies. And that was wonderful, kind of looking at, can we take information that is hosted in large databases about, it happened to be US citizens, so 22 million people at the time, and identify data signals that would indicate diabetic retinopathy, so eye disease, for patients that didn't know they even had diabetes, so type 2 diabetes, and actually what would be their trajectory after they were diagnosed. Would they need to see clinicians much earlier or much later because they've just been diagnosed? How bad will that eye disease, if it's going to happen, potentially be? And they said, right, what we're going to do at IBM is we're going to kind of move you into our wealth asset management part of the business. And I'm working in healthcare and life sciences and loving what I'm doing, and I was just like, I can't even run my own bank account. How am I going to advise clients around assets under management or how they should be balancing and optimizing their portfolio? I mean, yes, I'm good with data and I can code, and I'm a data scientist, but that's not for me something, and in no judgment to others that work in that sector, but that's not a sector that I want to work in. I really love healthcare and want to do my work in that space. So that day, to my kind of wife's slight terror, I gave him my notice. I didn't have a job to go to. I had, kind of the 3 months to find one. And what I did was I just wrote a little bit of script to spam LinkedIn to find anybody with director and partner and healthcare or life sciences in their interrupting in their title, and sent them my CV. And then if anyone kind of bit, I would then kind of follow up. And actually somebody from this place called KPMG, which I'd never heard of before, said, oh yeah, director in the healthcare part of that business, which sits in our, we have a large public sector business, said, yeah, we do a lot of work with the NHS. We're thinking about predictive analytics. Would you like to come and talk to us? And I thought, oh, why not? And so I started at KPMG kind of 4.5 years ago, and came in as a manager and now a director. And I have the privilege of, we're in kind of startup mode. And now we work across all our businesses, which cover kind of audit, tax, pensions. But, we have the privilege of working with a whole multitude of clients that you probably wouldn't think of when you think about one of the big four. I know that I didn't. And I've absolutely loved it and learned a lot. And so now I'm off to Roche as their digital and data science innovation lead, and super excited to get started.
Like, you've had such an impactful journey, and I can only imagine like your thought process going through and moving to different career paths, and then realizing, I want to be a data scientist, and learning more about what it means to be a data scientist. Wow, that has to be such an amazing feeling, realizing that you found the right path, that you want to narrow down and hone in the healthcare sector. And you mentioned that you had to learn how to code. That had to be probably really difficult. And you mentioned that there were people who were doing this since they were 4 or 5 years old. How long did it take for you to learn how to code? And this is just mainly for people who are listening on, who might be, in high school, or who might be in college and they're considering a data science route. How long did it take for you to actually learn?
Yeah, of course. And I think it's a really good and important question. And I think it's nice, I hope, for your listeners to hear that actually you can just pick it up whenever, right? So one of the things I always say, and I will actually answer your question in a moment, but it isn't what you've learned, but your aptitude to learn that is important. So one of the best programmers I know has a background in history. They did a history degree, master's and PhD in it, and actually they're a wonderful programmer. And so I think, so it took me a good kind of 2 years, I would say, to really understand how to think computationally, how to write elegant code that worked at scale. I think, and that's a journey, and I'm still on that journey. Just because I'm a director of data science and AI does not mean that journey has stopped or that I'm not learning. And I think one of the things that education is slightly, as in, and I talk about in England, we have these kind of step functions. So you either, you go to school or you go to university, or you do an apprenticeship, and there's these kind of step functions. Actually, learning isn't really like that. It's a continuous evolution of skills, and those skills change and diversify over time according to what you're passionate about and what you want to do with your life. So, for example, I'm starting this year to supervise as a PhD supervisor a person who has just retired. And that individual has gone, do you know what? I'm really passionate about graph databases and understanding artificial intelligence in the context of healthcare, and I want to do a PhD. And that's wonderful. And he rang me to say, when he was going through the UCL process, he was like, do you think this is silly given my age? And I was like, absolutely not. Like there's life is about kind of isn't it? It's about kind of finding the things you love and being very open to learning. And part of that opening to learn is also kind of failing, but having that kind of built up resistance. I think that's the one thing, if you traverse across careers or people, that actually is really important, building up resilience. Because I could, at the moment I'm learning about genomics. I did A-level biology in a year, right? But I don't remember it. So I'm learning it, and I'm learning. Okay, how do I start to do genomics, data science? That's new for me. Just because I'm 35 and just because I'm a director it does not matter. It it's all about kind of just picking up what you want to when you want to. And I think online, kind of large kind of Coursera and those kind of learning platforms have, again, I think we're lucky. I'm lucky to have a laptop. I have internet access. Lots of people don't, and I think that's that isn't equitable across the globe. But I think if you are fortunate to have that hardware and software, then you can access the skills you want to learn, and that's super cool. So yeah, I would say a good 2 years to code, and that really is intense. You do it 8 hours a day at least. You embrace failure. You do Kaggle competitions. You network. You go to meetups now virtually, but just keep trying. It's like a sport, right? You just keep training.
Yes, I think 2 years is actually not as bad as I thought. It's not as long as I thought. And I can only imagine, and I really hope that there are a lot of younger listeners who are considering going into the same path. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people, questioning, and they're wondering, like, is a STEM field right for me? Is data science, is a technological field right for me? And I just kind of want to talk about the importance of, diversity in that field. And I know that that's one of your passions. Where has that passion come from, and what advice do you have for young people who are going into this field and they might be questioning if this is the right path?
So I think they're all great questions. I think I take a step back and ask yourself, do you want to positively change the world with technology? And I think if the answer is yes, crack on. I think, kind of saying, do I want to be a data scientist, can actually put people off, because they go, oh, artificial intelligence, or oh, that all sounds, far too cerebral for me. And actually, it's not, right? You just need to go, do I want to change the world positively? And that's where you start. And if the answer is yes, then how do you want to do that with technology? And then one route may be in building algorithms to help people and to improve public services or to help citizens. So I don't think it should sound as scary as perhaps it is. And I think we don't do ourselves any favors sometimes as data scientists, because we need to know calculus and we need to really understand how these algorithms work. So I think on the one hand, we've got this kind of democratization of data science. So anyone can go and download Python, they can download machine learning algorithm, and they can apply it to their data. That's wonderful. However, I think often people may not understand the mathematics underneath that algorithm, and that can put people off. So that kind of non-linear algebra and that calculus, I would focus time there, really understanding how the algorithms work. And that again takes time, and people might think that sounds quite hairy, kind of calculus and algorithms, but actually, if you can tell me what 2 times 2 is, then you can do algebra, right? You can do nonlinear algebra, you can do calculus, because you distill it down to its simplest forms. And all that we're doing here is kind of, doing that across many different kind of characteristics or features of data.
Yeah, so just talk, like, I just want to know about, like, your passion about diversity and inclusion, and why it's so important in the STEM fields, especially today.
Yeah. So I think it stems, no pun intended. I think it stems from when I look at myself, my own circumstances. So I come from a single parent background. I've gone through the care system in the UK. I'm the first person to go to university in my family. I'm gay. I look at myself and feel different. But that hasn't been a barrier, thankfully, for me. And so when I look around and I see very similar types of people, I think we have a problem. I think we have a problem, particularly. I just need to think about with women, for example, and I think this is a much larger issue about equality in the workplace and equality in general. But I think if we just take the axes or the dimension of gender, I'm often the only woman in the room, but I'm still a Caucasian woman in the room, right? I see far fewer, and I know that there are far fewer Black females that enter this world, because I have the privilege of talking and mentoring some of them, and they say to me, actually, this is really hard. I don't know how to be in these situations, and I don't know how to progress, because when I look up, I actually don't see people or role models. And I think that's super, super important, to start to break down those barriers, but also to take accountability of them. So one of the things I very much talk about with my team is, why are we using gendered language? Why are we saying, hey guys? It's so easy to do it, and I do it all the time, but I never think, and actually people have told me I don't feel included. And I think, gosh, that's very true, because actually it calls out that maybe you're just talking about one part of our population. And actually, I think we have a growing problem with not only looking at, I think what I would love to see and be part of with lots of other people, and I think allyship is so important here, where we have males, and we also have kind of white males that we know dominate these sectors, actually say, right, we need to be the change in the world we want to see. And you just have to look at some awful reports that we know. We know that, for example, some facial recognition systems literally will not pick up Black faces. We know that there are some algorithms that actually have needed to be turned off by extremely large cloud vendors, because they became very racist very quickly from the data that they were scraping from Twitter, for example. And I think when the problem we have is, if we don't have diversity in the room and people thinking more widely about the data from their perspectives, and I think diversity, we know, has all the positivities of, actually it creates a wonderful and empowered workplace. It gives different challenges and angles to ideas, and that's really what you should be doing when you're innovating. You should be saying, right, I want to hear your idea, tell me, let's bounce ideas off each other. Why do you think that? Otherwise we end up with systems that are trained in a very narrow way, and we have systems, sadly, that actually impact a wide number of people, that and that's the issue that we have. And I think that we all, with these systems, because they are at scale, they impact so many people, then that needs to reflect the developers that are developing them. And actually, it's a very homologous group of normally white males, and that's a real problem. But it's not a problem that is kind of those individuals' fault, right? We need, as a society, to take a step back and say, why is STEM seen as more of a male thing to do? You just need to go to a toy store and you'll see boys' toys are all about microscopes and about telescopes and being an astronaut. Go to the girls' part section of a toy store, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this. I'm just saying you see very different things. And actually, why do we need to even assign a gender to toys, right? And then that stereotyping just becomes amplified. And so I often talk to people, young girls at school, and they will draw what a scientist looks like, and it will be a male with glasses with a white coat on. And you kind of go, but I'm a scientist. And they go, oh, are you really? And you start to kind of show them these wonderful kind of role models that we have in our society. Just think where we would be if we didn't have, and I know it's a conglomerate of scientists that have done an amazing job. But if you just think about the female scientist at University of Oxford that pioneered the COVID-19 vaccination program. I mean, what an inspirational female. If you think about Marie Curie, the ability to see bones in the body and where that's taken imaging in medicine, it's absolutely inspirational, but we don't hear about them, we don't see them, and we certainly don't see that in business. And that's the real problem. And I've just spoken about those two females, for example, are white, right? We have lots of wonderful kind of diversity that we need to make sure these algorithms are checked and are built by a diverse set of people.
I believe that we're definitely at a pivotal point in history where there's just so much awareness of things that need to change. Bouncing off of the topic of equality and diversity in the STEM field, can we talk about the importance of supporting individuals that are LGBTQ plus, and just the importance of pride, because it is Pride Month, and I definitely want to touch on that topic because it's just so important.
Yeah, pride. Yeah. So it's quite an interesting one for me, because lots of people ask me, what is it like to be a gay woman in tech? And I kind of don't identify as a gay woman in tech. I identify as a woman, and I happen to be gay. And I've been very fortunate that I've never felt, and I know that I'm fortunate in this way, because I know some of my colleagues, some of my friends have felt this in the workplace and in their lives, discriminated against. They felt that there are barriers to their career, and I think that is genuinely heartbreaking that people think that, and that they feel it. That is something that I think is so important as people in society, that we try and empower everyone, because actually the only thing we share, if you really boil it down, the only thing we have in common is difference, but we don't see that. And I think that it is Pride Month, and I think I'm lucky. I think that lots of people maybe don't see that or feel that, and that is how it should be. But I know for a lot of people it's not, and I've said before, that's why I'm very energised at KPMG. We have the Breathe network, that is our LGBT plus network around people feeling empowered at work, however they identify. I'm an advocate of stone walls, and I take part in events as well, to understand, what are people going through. And I think sometimes, because you're part of a community like LGBT, everyone thinks because I'm gay, I understand all the intricacies of maybe the trans community or identifying as non-binary. And actually, I make sure that I try and go to events and try and understand that, and I talk to people about their experiences. But I don't, right? And so it's kind of on me, just because I'm part of that community, to still go out and understand what is it like to live your life, and how can I help you, and what can I do. So one of the things that KPMG, and I think kudos to them, have, and the Breathe network have spoken a lot about at work, is our pronouns. How do you identify? And I identify as she and her. And I now always, if I'm fortunate to be invited to talk at an event or present a poster or anything like that, I ask for my pronouns to be part of that. And I've always worn my kind of LGBT bracelet. I talk very openly about my wife to my clients, because actually I've never faced any discrimination, I want to those little subtle things maybe will help kind of other people that don't feel.
That's really amazing to hear, and I'm sure that's going to be very encouraging for anyone listening who might not be at a point where they can be open about who they are and who they identify as, especially when it comes to just how they feel in their professional career. And it's really important to bring up the topic of using pronouns and having it as a public way to identify yourself. Can you tell us about why it's important and why more people should, be including their pronouns, why that visibility is important?
Sure, and I think I would suggest that people don't have to do that. That it shouldn't be an autocratic thing. If they feel comfortable sharing their pronouns, then that's wonderful. And the reason I do it is because I think it calls out that actually some people, you may look at me and think female, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's how I identify. I happen to, so I do happen to identify as a female, as a woman, but that's, for some people in our society, that isn't how they identify, and that's not how they feel. But I think we are so guided by how we see people visually that maybe we start to make an inference that if I happen to see someone that looks like me, that I would say she or her. And I remember once actually, and I was really pleased that I got called out on it. It was an event for One Health Tech, which, just a quick pun and shout out, is a wonderfully diverse network and organisation looking at how to be more diverse and inclusive in the health tech space. So do check them out. And it's co-led by the wonderful Maxine McIntosh as well. So shout out to her. But I remember I was hosting, it happened to be at DeepMind at Google, their annual event evening. And I was emceeing. I was doing a terrible job. I had a whole script and I just was awful. But anyway, I had a great time. I don't know if other people did. And I remember it came to a Q&A section, and a person put up their hand, and I said, "Oh, the lady at the front in the front row." And she said, "Well, actually, I'm no lady." And for the first time, I quite rightly got called out on my perception of that individual on a very public stage. And that's really stayed with me in a really positive way, because I thought, gosh, I wasn't even aware that I had done that I had instantly looked at that individual and just made the association that you're a female and that's how you identify, and that's, your life and the life experiences you have. And actually that individual came up to me at the end and said, "Actually, I'm non-binary, and it's really important for me that people understand that, and I hope you don't mind me calling you out." And I was like, "No, absolutely not." And why didn't I say, the person wearing the red top, right? Why and I think our kind of, again, it calls to the diversity and inclusivity of society. If I can do little changes like that, then I think that enables people to go, I have a window here to talk. And I know that one of the partners in our organisation, when they first joined, they were asked, "What does your partner do?" And it gave them the ability for the first time in 10 years to say, "She does this." And that individual had not been out at work before. So it's just these things that I think, they may seem minor, but they have such profound ripple effects for somebody. And I'm always trying to learn.
I really appreciate you talking about that, because I think a lot of people can speak to what you just said, and a lot of people also are not aware. They might see people include their pronouns and bring them up and not understand the significance of it, or if they should even partake in including their pronouns. So I really appreciate you talking about that. And but we're up at our time, Rebecca, and I really genuinely appreciate your time here at Data Talk. And can you tell our listeners how they can reach you and just how they can find out more about you? maybe list your social platforms.
So my marriage would only survive one social media platform. So I'm not on Facebook, I'm not on Twitter, but I am on LinkedIn, and I would genuinely love to hear from anybody who would like to discuss what I've said, challenge anything that I've said, that I could be useful to. Just please do send me a private message. I will always make time. May not be instant, but I will always make time for you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Data Talk podcast. We share new shows every week, and you can find the full catalog of previous episodes, including YouTube videos, on our Experian news blog. You can get access to the full catalog by going to experian.com/datatalk. And we always love hearing from our community, so if you have any comments or suggestions for future shows or guests you'd like to hear from, please let us know. You can leave a comment on iTunes, or you can reach out to us on Twitter at Experian Data Lab. You can also email me directly. My email is michael.delgado@experian.com. Take care, and we'll chat next week.